There exists, in the temperature-controlled vaults of Yale University's Voynich Rare Book and Manuscript Library, an object that has defied every attempt at understanding for more than 6 centuries. It sits behind glass, unassuming in its medieval binding, its pages yellowed by time, and yet it holds within its 240 vellum leaves a secret so profound, so utterly resistant to human comprehension, that it has driven brilliant minds to obsession, scholars to madness, and cryptographers to despair. It is called the Voynich Manuscript. Imagine, if you will, holding in your hands a book written in a language that has never been spoken on earth, a script that flows with the confidence of genuine writing, yet corresponds to no alphabet ever devised by human civilization. Imagine turning its pages to find botanical illustrations of plants that have never grown in any garden, astronomical charts that map no known constellation, and diagrams of systems that serve no purpose we can fathom. This is not science fiction. This is not fantasy. This is real, and it is waiting. Close your eyes for a moment and travel with me. The year is 1912. World War I has not yet shattered the old empires. Einstein's relativity is still fresh and controversial. And in the Villa Mondragone, a Jesuit college nestled in the hills outside Rome, an antiquarian book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich discovers something that will haunt humanity for the next century and beyond. The afternoon light filters through ancient windows as Voynich's fingers, trembling with the instinct that tells a true collector, when they've found something extraordinary, carefully turn the pages of a manuscript that seems to have been forgotten by time itself. The vellum whispers beneath his touch. The ink, still vibrant after centuries, seems almost alive. And the text speaks in a voice that no living person can understand. But this is not where our story begins. To truly comprehend the magnitude of what the Voynich manuscript represents, we must journey far deeper into the past, into an age when knowledge itself wore a different face, when science and mysticism danced as partners rather than adversaries, when the boundaries between the known and the unknowable were drawn in different places than they are today. We must venture into the medieval world, a time when a book could be more than mere paper and ink. It could be a doorway, a weapon, a key to unlock the very fabric of reality. The Voynich manuscript is approximately the size of a modern paperback novel, measuring about 9 inches by 6 inches. Yet within this modest dimension lies perhaps the most complex puzzle ever created by human hands. Or perhaps, as some have dared to suggest, by hands not quite human at all. The manuscript contains approximately 170,000 individual glyphs, organized into what appears to be roughly 35,000 words, written in an alphabet of 20 to 30 distinct characters, depending on how you count them. These characters flow in elegant lines across the pages, forming paragraphs, sections, and what appear to be chapters. But here is where reality begins to bend into impossibility. Despite the application of the world's most sophisticated cryptographic techniques, despite the efforts of World War II codebreakers who cracked Nazi Enigma machines, despite the computational power of modern artificial intelligence systems that can translate extinct languages from fragmentary evidence, no one has ever successfully deciphered a single confirmed word of the Voynich manuscript's text. Think about that for a moment. In an age where we have decoded the human genome, where we have translated Linear B and ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, where we have deciphered countless historical ciphers and codes, this one medieval manuscript remains utterly, completely, almost mockingly illegible. The manuscript is divided into several distinct sections, each more puzzling than the last. There is the botanical section, filled with drawings of plants that seem almost familiar, yet correspond to no known species. Some appear to be chimeras, impossible combinations of roots, stems, flowers, and leaves that could never exist in nature. Others seem tantalizingly close to real plants, yet always with some detail wrong, some element that places them just beyond identification. Are these encrypted representations of real plants? Are they symbolic? Are they botanical specimens from some lost garden that existed only in the imagination? Or perhaps in a place we have yet to rediscover? Then there is the astronomical and astrological section, dense with circular diagrams that resemble zodiacal charts, but contain strange symbols and arrangements. The cosmos depicted here follows no astronomical system we recognize, yet possesses an internal logic that suggests genuine knowledge rather than random invention. 9 pointed stars appear alongside familiar lunar phases. Cellular-looking structures suggest biological knowledge centuries ahead of their time, or perhaps an entirely different understanding of the relationship between microcosm and macrocosm. Most mysterious of all is what researchers call the balneological section, pages upon pages of interconnected pools and channels, populated by small naked figures, mostly women, who appear to be bathing or floating in these mysterious waters. What ritual is being depicted here? What lost practice? Some see hydraulic systems, others perceive alchemical processes. Still others suggest pharmaceutical preparations or fertility rites from some forgotten tradition. The truth remains as elusive as mist. The final section appears to be pharmaceutical in nature, with jars and vessels containing plant parts and substances, accompanied by dense paragraphs of that impenetrable text. This is perhaps the most tantalizing section of all, for it suggests practical knowledge, recipes, formulae, the kind of information that should be decodable through context and comparison. And yet it resists every attempt at interpretation. Here is what makes the Voynich Manuscript more than just an historical curiosity, more than a mere puzzle for academics to debate. It represents a fundamental challenge to our understanding of human knowledge and communication. Every language ever created by humans follows certain statistical patterns. These patterns are so universal, so deeply embedded in how our minds organize information, that they persist across cultures, alphabets, and historical periods. From ancient Sumerian to modern English, from Chinese characters to Cherokee syllabary, these patterns hold true. The Voynich Manuscript's text follows some of these patterns, but violates others in ways that should be impossible. It has too much internal consistency to be random gibberish, yet too many anomalies to fit any known linguistic model. It is as if someone created a language specifically designed to look and feel real while remaining forever incomprehensible. Or perhaps it represents a form of communication so alien to our understanding that we lack the very concepts necessary to decode it. As we stand at the threshold of this mystery, we must ask ourselves, why does the Voynich Manuscript matter? In an age of instant information, why should we care about one unreadable medieval book? The answer lies in what it represents. The Voynich Manuscript is a reminder that there are still frontiers of the unknown within our own history, secrets locked in plain sight, knowledge that our ancestors possessed but did not pass down to us, or perhaps could not pass down in ways we would understand. It speaks to the possibility that human history is far stranger, far more complex than the neat linear narrative we have constructed. It suggests that there may have been streams of knowledge, entire traditions of understanding, that have vanished, leaving behind only incomprehensible artifacts. And so we begin our journey into this mystery, our journey. Over the next 2 hours, we will walk through time itself, from the moment of the manuscript's modern discovery backward through the centuries to its mysterious creation, and forward again to the cutting edge of contemporary attempts to crack its code. We will meet the scholars who devoted their lives to this puzzle, encounter the theories both plausible and fantastic, and ultimately confront the deeper questions that the Voynich Manuscript poses about the nature of knowledge, the persistence of mystery, and the limits of human understanding. This is not just the story of a book. This is the story of humanity's eternal drive to understand the incomprehensible, to decode the undecipherable, to shine light into the darkest corners of our own past. This is the story of what happens when we encounter something that refuses to yield its secrets, no matter how many tools we bring to bear against it. The Voynich Manuscript waits in its vault, patient as stone, silent as the grave, holding its secrets as it has for more than 600 years. Let us now attempt what so many have attempted before us, to understand the unknowable, to read the unreadable, to hear the voice that speaks in a language of pure mystery. The journey begins. Tracing the shadow. Every mystery has a beginning, though finding that beginning can itself become part of the mystery. The Voynich Manuscript's trail through history is as enigmatic as the text written upon its pages, appearing and disappearing through the centuries like a ghost that refuses to be laid to rest. Our documented journey begins in 1912, in that moment when Wilfrid Voynich, Polish-American antiquarian and revolutionary-turned-rare book dealer, first laid eyes upon the manuscript in the Villa Mondragone. But Voynich was not the manuscript's creator, nor even its first modern discoverer. He was merely the man who brought it out of obscurity and into the light of 20th century scrutiny. Wilfrid Michael Voynich was himself a figure worthy of any adventure novel. Born in Lithuania when it was part of the Russian Empire, he became involved in revolutionary activities against Tsarist rule, was arrested, imprisoned, and eventually escaped to London, where he established himself as a dealer in rare books and manuscripts. His wife, Ethel Lillian Voynich, wrote the famous novel The Gadfly. They were people who understood secrecy, codes, and the weight of forbidden knowledge. Perhaps this is why fate chose Wilfrid to become the manuscript's guardian for the modern age. According to Voynich's own account, he acquired the manuscript along with other books from the Jesuit archive at the Villa Mondragone. The Jesuits, in need of funds to restore their college, were selling off parts of their extensive collection. What made Voynich's pulse quicken when he examined this particular volume? Was it the strange script, the bizarre illustrations, or was it the letter he found tucked within its pages, a letter that would open a window into the manuscript's documented past? This letter, dated 1666, was written by Johannes Marcus Marci, a physician and rector of Charles University in Prague, addressed to the famous Jesuit scholar Athanasius Kircher in Rome. Marci's words, preserved across 3.5 centuries, speak to us with both clarity and mystery. This book, bequeathed to me by an intimate friend, I destined for you, my very dear Athanasius, as soon as it came into my possession, for I was convinced it could be read by no one except yourself. Marci goes on to reveal something extraordinary. The book had once belonged to Emperor Rudolf II of Habsburg, one of the most enigmatic and fascinating figures of the late Renaissance, and that Rudolf had paid the enormous sum of 600 gold ducats for it, roughly equivalent to $70,000 in today's currency. Rudolf, Marci writes, believed the book to be the work of Roger Bacon, the 13th century English philosopher and proto-scientist known as Dr. Mirabilis, the wonderful teacher. With this letter, threads of the mystery begin to weave together, drawing us backward through time. Let us follow these threads and see where they lead. Rudolf II reigned over the Holy Roman Empire from 1576 to 1612, but his true passion was not governance, but the pursuit of hidden knowledge. His court in Prague became a magnet for alchemists, astrologers, astronomers, artists, and mystics from across Europe. Johannes Kepler calculated the orbits of planets in Rudolf's Prague. The astronomers Tycho Brahe spent his final years there. The Rabbi Judah Loer ben Bezalel, legendary creator of the Golem, walked Prague's streets during Rudolf's reign. English Magus John Dee visited the court, bringing with him his own mysteries and supposed communications with angels. This was a time when the boundaries between what we now call science and what we dismiss as magic were still fluid, still permeable. Alchemy was not yet chemistry. Astrology was not yet divorced from astronomy. The systematic investigation of nature and the search for spiritual transformation were seen as two aspects of the same great work. Rudolph's Kunstkammer, his cabinet of curiosities, contained astronomical instruments alongside unicorn horns, mechanical marvels beside alchemical manuscripts, paintings by Archimboldo near preserved specimens of exotic animals. Into this world of wonders and seekers, the Voynich Manuscript arrived. But from where? And why did Rudolph believe it to be the work of Roger Bacon? Roger Bacon, who lived from approximately 1214 to 1294, was a Franciscan friar, philosopher, and one of the earliest European advocates for empirical methods in science. He wrote extensively on optics, astronomy, and alchemy. He studied languages and codes. He was fascinated by the possibility of extending human life and transmuting base materials into gold. More importantly for our story, he was rumoured to have possessed secret knowledge, to have written in codes and ciphers to protect dangerous wisdom from those who might misuse it. The attribution to Bacon may have come through John Dee, the English mathematician, astronomer, and advisor to Queen Elizabeth I, who visited Rudolph's court in the 1580s. Dee owned an enormous library of medieval and ancient texts, including many works on cryptography and secret writing. Some researchers believe Dee may have sold the manuscript to Rudolph, making the attribution to Bacon to increase its value and appeal. Others suggest the attribution may have been genuine, that Dee truly believed or had evidence that Bacon created this mysterious text. But here we encounter our first major obstacle: radiocarbon dating of the Voynich Manuscript's vellum, conducted at the University of Arizona in 2009, places its creation between 1404 and 1438, with 95% confidence. This is more than a century after Roger Bacon's death. Unless the manuscript was written on old vellum, not impossible, but unusual, it cannot be Bacon's work. So if not Bacon, then who, and when, and why? Let us paint a picture of the world in which the Voynich manuscript was most likely created. Europe in the early 15th century, emerging from the long shadow of the Black Death that had claimed perhaps a third of the population. A world where knowledge from the Islamic Golden Age was flowing into Europe through Spain and Italy, bringing with it advanced mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. A world where ancient texts were being rediscovered, retranslated, and reconsidered. A world where the Renaissance was just beginning to crack open the rigid certainties of medieval thought. This was also a world where heresy was a capital crime, where the Inquisition's reach extended across Catholic Europe, where the wrong book in the wrong hands could lead to torture and execution. Scholars and scientists worked in a landscape of danger, where advancing knowledge could easily be construed as challenging doctrine. Is it any wonder that some knowledge might have been concealed in codes, hidden in symbols, written in languages meant to be understood only by the initiated? The manuscript's illustrations offer tantalizing clues about the milieu of its creation. The clothing styles of the small human figures, when they appear, seem consistent with early 15th century European fashion. The castellation, the architectural style of fortifications, in some illustrations matches that period. Even the pigments used in the ink and colorants have been analysed and found consistent with early Renaissance materials. But the content itself seems to draw from multiple traditions. Some of the astronomical diagrams resemble Islamic astronomical manuscripts. Certain botanical drawings echo herbals from the Byzantine tradition. The circular, interconnected nature of many illustrations suggests alchemical symbolism. The naked figures in the balneological section recall both medieval medical illustrations of the four humours and ancient mystery cult imagery. It is as if the creator synthesized knowledge from multiple streams of tradition, encoding them in a private language all their own. Consider the plants. The botanical section, which comprises roughly half the manuscript, shows approximately 113 different plant species. Botanists and herbalists have spent decades attempting to identify them, with limited success. A few seem to be combinations of parts from multiple real plants. Some appear to be stylized versions of common European herbs. Others are completely fantastical, impossible organisms that could never exist in nature. Why would someone create an herbal filled with imaginary plants? One theory suggests these are not meant to be literal depictions, but rather symbolic or allegorical representations. In medieval and Renaissance thought, plants were not just botanical specimens, but signatures of divine creation, each possessing not only physical properties, but metaphysical correspondences. A plant might be drawn in a coded way to represent not its appearance, but its essence, its use, its relationship to celestial forces or human health. If the Voynich Manuscript is indeed a work of natural philosophy encoded in this symbolic system, then expecting to identify the plants by their visual appearance would be like trying to read music by analyzing the shapes of the notes without understanding musical notation. Another possibility, darker and more intriguing, is that these plants represent genuine botanical knowledge now lost to us. Consider how many plant species have gone extinct in the past 6 centuries. Consider how much traditional botanical knowledge has been forgotten as herbalism gave way to modern pharmacology. Consider the possibility that the manuscript records plants that grew in specific regions, perhaps cultivated in particular conditions, that no longer exist. If this is true, then the Voynich Manuscript is not just a code to be cracked, but an encyclopedia of vanished natural knowledge, a botanical ark of species and wisdom that died out before they could be properly documented by our modern systems of taxonomy. The astronomical and astrological sections deepen the mystery. Here we find circular diagrams divided into segments, many featuring what appear to be zodiacal symbols, though not always the standard 12 we know. Some diagrams show concentric circles with text labels we cannot read, suggesting complex systems of correspondence between celestial and terrestrial realms. One famous page shows what appears to be a circular astronomical instrument, perhaps an astrolabe or a armillary sphere, but its markings correspond to no known device. In medieval and Renaissance thought, astronomy and astrology were inseparable from medicine, agriculture, alchemy, and even politics. The positions of planets and stars were believed to influence everything from the efficacy of medicines to the best times for planting crops to the outcomes of battles. A comprehensive work of natural philosophy would necessarily include extensive astronomical information. But why encode it? Why not simply write it in Latin, the universal language of European scholars? Perhaps because the knowledge was heretical. Perhaps because it contradicted church doctrine about the nature of the heavens. We know that Galileo faced the Inquisition for suggesting that Earth moved around the sun. We know that earlier astronomers and natural philosophers faced persecution for advancing ideas that challenged established authority. If the Voynich Manuscript contains astronomical knowledge that its creator knew would be deemed dangerous, concealment would not just be prudent, it would be necessary for survival. Or perhaps the encoding serves a different purpose entirely. In many mystical traditions, the very act of concealing knowledge is part of the knowledge itself. The effort required to decode the message is part of the transformative process. The mystery is not an obstacle, but a teacher. You don't simply read this kind of text, you wrestle with it, meditate upon it, allow it to reshape your mind until you become capable of understanding it. In this interpretation, the Voynich Manuscript is not just a book, but a spiritual exercise, a meditation encoded in botanical and astronomical forms. We must also consider the possibility that has haunted Voynich researchers since the beginning, that the manuscript is an elaborate hoax, a fraud created to deceive collectors or patrons. If so, it is the most sophisticated hoax in history. The consistency of the script across hundreds of pages, the internal logic of the illustrations, the statistical properties of the text that mimic natural language while remaining undecipherable. All of this would require not just artistic skill, but a deep understanding of linguistics and cryptography that would be extraordinary for the 15th century. Edward Kelly, John Dee's associate and supposedly a medium who communicated with angels, has been proposed as a possible hoaxer. Kelly was known to be a charlatan in some respects, and he had both the opportunity and motive to create a mysterious manuscript to sell to Rudolph II. But could Kelly have created something this complex, this internally consistent, this resistant to centuries of cryptographic analysis? Most experts think not. The manuscript shows too much genuine knowledge, too much careful construction, to be merely a fraud designed to extract money from a credulous emperor. As we trace these threads backward through time, from Voynich to Marcy to Rudolph to Dee, possibly to Bacon, and finally to that unknown creator or creators in early 15th century Europe, we find ourselves not closer to answers, but deeper into mystery. Every new discovery seems to open more questions than it closes. Every theory, no matter how plausible, eventually encounters some fact that doesn't quite fit, some detail that refuses to align. But perhaps this is as it should be. Perhaps the Voynich manuscript is teaching us something about the nature of knowledge itself, that there are forms of understanding that cannot be transmitted directly, that some wisdom must be discovered rather than taught, that the past does not always yield its secrets to those who interrogate it with modern tools and assumptions. The medieval world understood something that we have largely forgotten, that mystery itself has value, that not all knowledge should be accessible to all people at all times, that there is a place in human experience for the numinous, the inexplicable, the irreducibly strange. The Voynich manuscript stands as a monument to this understanding, a book that refuses to be read, a text that declines to reveal its meaning, a mystery that persists despite all our attempts to dissolve it in the acid of rational analysis. And yet, we persist in trying. We cannot help ourselves. It is our nature to seek, to question, to attempt to illuminate every shadow. The Voynich manuscript calls to us across the centuries, challenging us to prove ourselves worthy of understanding it. It says, "You claim to be advanced, to be enlightened, to have surpassed the limitations of past ages. Very well, then read me. Understand me. Tell me what I am." So far, across more than a century of modern attempts, the manuscript has remained silent. But the story of those attempts, the brilliant minds that have wrestled with this puzzle, the theories and breakthroughs and failures, and occasional glimpses of possible meaning, that story is just beginning. The Codebreakers' obsession. The 20th century brought with it an arsenal of new tools for attacking old mysteries, statistical analysis, computational power, cryptographic expertise honed in 2 world wars, and eventually artificial intelligence. Surely, thought each new generation of scholars, surely now we have the means to crack the Voynich code. Surely this medieval puzzle cannot withstand the full might of modern science. They were wrong every time. But oh, what glorious failures they were. After Wilfrid Voynich brought the manuscript into public attention in 1912, it quickly became an obsession for cryptographers, linguists, and amateur enthusiasts around the world. Voynich himself believed it could be decoded, must be decoded. He commissioned photographic copies and distributed them to scholars, launching what would become more than a century of frustration, false breakthroughs, and deepening mystery. Among the first to seriously attempt the decipherment was William Romain Newbold, a professor of philosophy at the University of Pennsylvania, with expertise in medieval philosophy and cryptography. In 1919, Newbold announced that he had successfully decoded the Voynich manuscript, and that it was indeed the work of Roger Bacon. More than that, Newbold claimed the manuscript contained knowledge far beyond what should have been possible in the 13th century. Descriptions of cellular structure visible only through microscopes, astronomical observations of nebulae, advanced optical theories. Newbold's method was baroque in its complexity. He theorized that the visible text was not the real message at all, but rather each character was composed of tiny shorthand marks, microscopic symbols, that could only be seen under magnification. These micro-characters, he claimed, spelled out Greek and Latin words that, when rearranged according to an anagram system, revealed Bacon's advanced scientific observations. For a brief moment, it seemed the mystery was solved. Newbold presented his findings to academic audiences, published articles, gained followers. The idea that Roger Bacon had possessed a microscope and telescope centuries before their supposed invention was sensational, revolutionary. It suggested that the history of science needed to be completely rewritten. But then other scholars began to examine Newbold's methodology more closely. The microscopic shorthand he had detected seemed to be nothing more than cracks in the ink, irregularities in the vellum, artifacts of aging and reproduction. The Greek and Latin words he extracted required such complex manipulation through anagrams that virtually any message could be derived from any source text, and the resulting translations, when examined critically, were vague and ambiguous, open to almost any interpretation. By the time of Newbold's death in 1926, his theory had been largely discredited, though not before it had captured the public imagination and established the Voynich Manuscript as one of the great unsolved mysteries. The failure of Newbold's approach illustrated what would become a recurring problem in Voynich studies. The manuscript's resistance to pattern matching is so strong that researchers begin to see patterns where none exist, to find confirmations of their theories in the noise of random variation. The manuscript becomes a kind of Rorschach test, reflecting back whatever the observer brings to it. In the 1940s and 1950s, professional cryptographers, many of them veterans of wartime code-breaking, turned their attention to the manuscript. If these experts could break German Enigma machines and Japanese diplomatic codes, surely they could handle one medieval manuscript. The thinking was logical. Complex modern ciphers had fallen to statistical analysis and mathematical techniques. How much harder could an old manuscript be? Much harder, it turned out. Impossibly harder. William F. Friedman, one of the greatest cryptographers America has ever produced, the man who broke the Japanese purple cipher and arguably shortened World War II by his efforts, became obsessed with the Voynich Manuscript. Friedman organized a group of scholars and cryptographers at the National Security Agency to work on the problem. This wasn't a casual hobby. This was the full application of America's cryptographic establishment, the same minds and methods that protected the nation's most vital secrets, directed at a centuries-old puzzle. The first study group, as it came to be known, worked on the manuscript intermittently from 1944 to 1946. They applied frequency analysis, looking at which symbols appeared most often and in what combinations. They searched for patterns in symbol distribution, looking for the kind of regularities that betray simple substitution ciphers. They compared the manuscript's statistical properties to those of known languages, both living and dead. They brought to bear every tool in the cryptographic arsenal, and they found ambiguity, always ambiguity. The manuscript's text showed some properties of natural language. Words appeared with frequencies that weren't quite random. Certain character combinations appeared regularly while others never occurred. But other properties were all wrong. The text had too little variety in word length compared to normal languages. Certain patterns repeated too regularly. The statistical distribution was close to natural language, but not quite right, like a photograph that's almost in focus but remains frustratingly blurred. Friedman eventually developed his own theory, that the manuscript was written in an artificial philosophical language, similar to the constructed languages that scholars in the 16th and 17th centuries created to express ideas directly without the ambiguities of natural language. These philosophical languages organize concepts into hierarchical categories, with words constructed systematically to reflect their meanings. If the Voynich text was written in such a language, it would explain why it had some language-like properties, but didn't match any known language. But even this theory, elegant as it was, couldn't be definitively proven. The manuscript remained sealed, its secrets intact, even against the most sophisticated cryptographic minds of the 20th century. Meanwhile, other researchers pursued different approaches. Robert Brumbaugh, a professor of medieval philosophy at Yale, proposed that the manuscript was an experimental treatise on the elixir of life, with the plant illustrations representing alchemical processes rather than actual botanicals. Leo Levitov suggested it was a ritual manual for a Cathar sect, written in a polyglot oral language mixing various medieval tongues. John Stoyko claimed it was written in Ukrainian without vowels. Each theory had its proponents. Each seemed to explain some aspects of the manuscript, and each ultimately failed to provide a convincing, comprehensive translation. The psychological toll of engaging with the Voynich manuscript became apparent. Researchers would spend years, sometimes decades, working on the problem. They would experience moments of apparent breakthrough, periods of euphoria when patterns seemed to emerge and meanings appeared to crystallize. Then would come the crushing realization that their solution didn't work, that they had been chasing phantoms, that the manuscript had once again eluded them. Some researchers never recovered from their obsession. They published increasingly elaborate theories that convinced no one but themselves. They saw conspiracies to suppress their findings. They descended into a kind of madness born from wrestling too long with something that refuses to be comprehended. The manuscript seemed to exact a price from those who pursued it too ardently, as if knowledge itself could be a dangerous thing to seek. But was the manuscript deliberately designed to drive people mad? Or was it simply that humans are pattern-seeking creatures, and when confronted with something that appears meaningful but resists all attempts at interpretation, our minds rebel, creating false patterns rather than accept that no pattern might exist? The advent of computer technology in the late 20th century seemed to promise a new approach. Computers could analyze the text with perfect accuracy and tireless patience. They could detect patterns invisible to human perception. They could compare the manuscript's statistical properties to vast databases of known languages and ciphers. Surely now, with silicon chips and digital analysis, the code would fall. In the 1970s and 80s, several researchers used early computers to analyze the Voynich text. They confirmed what the human cryptographers had found. The text had genuine statistical complexity, but that complexity was strange, neither purely random nor quite matching natural language. Some analyses suggested the text might be composed of meaningless syllables arranged to look like language, what cryptographers call a hoax cipher. But if so, it was an extraordinarily sophisticated hoax showing internal consistency across hundreds of pages. One of the most significant computer-aided studies came from Jorge Stolfi of the University of Campinas in Brazil and Gabriele Landini of the University of Birmingham in England. Working in the 1990s and early 2000s, they used computer analysis to identify what they called Voyniches, the unique statistical signature of the manuscript's text. They found that Voyniches has some remarkable properties. The text shows patterns that suggest word-level grammatical structure. Words aren't just randomly placed. They seem to follow rules about what types of words can appear in what positions. This is consistent with natural language, but unusual for most cipher systems. The manuscript appears to be written in at least two different languages, or dialects of Voyniches, which they termed A and B. These variants differ in their statistical properties, but are clearly related. Why would a cipher system have dialects? This suggests either that the manuscript was written by multiple authors, or that it records some form of natural or constructed language that had regional variations. Most intriguingly, the text shows what linguists call word structure. Characters don't combine randomly. Certain characters appear only at the beginnings of words, others only at the ends, others only in the middle. This is exactly how natural languages work. English speakers know that ng can appear at the end of words, but rarely at the beginning. Voynich's has similar patterns, suggesting it follows linguistic rules rather than simple encryption. But here's the paradox that has tormented researchers. Voynich's follows too many linguistic rules while simultaneously breaking others. It's as if someone created a language that obeys enough linguistic principles to seem real, but violates others in ways that make it unlike any language that has ever been spoken. Is this the signature of a constructed language, an elaborately encoded natural language, or evidence of something we don't yet understand about how language can work? In the early 21st century, new technologies brought new approaches. Statistical linguists began using advanced probabilistic models to analyze the text. Computer scientists applied machine learning algorithms. Even artificial intelligence was brought into the battle against the manuscript's secrecy. In 2014, a team of researchers from the University of Bedfordshire claimed that the manuscript was written in a Semitic language, possibly Hebrew, encoded using a vowel stripping method. They produced some suggestive partial translations. But other experts quickly pointed out inconsistencies and questioned whether their method was reliable enough to constitute genuine decipherment. In 2017, Nicholas Gibbs, a television writer and researcher, claimed to have cracked the code, suggesting the manuscript was a medical text describing women's health and spa treatments, with each symbol representing an abbreviation of Latin words. His theory gained media attention before scholars pointed out numerous flaws. His supposed abbreviations didn't match known medieval abbreviation systems. His Latin translations were often grammatically incorrect, and his method required so many assumptions and special cases that it could likely decode random text into seemingly meaningful Latin. In 2019, Gerard Cheshire, a researcher at the University of Bristol, proposed that the manuscript was written in Proto-Romance, an extinct language ancestral to modern Romance languages, and described it as a compendium of information about herbal remedies, bathing, and astrological beliefs. Within days, dozens of linguists and medieval scholars published rebuttals, pointing out that Proto-Romance was never a single language, that no such language would have the statistical properties of Voynich's, and that Cheshire's translations were linguistically impossible. These repeated false breakthroughs reveal something profound about our relationship with mystery. We want so desperately to solve the unsolvable that we sometimes convince ourselves we've succeeded when we haven't. Each failed decipherment follows a similar pattern: initial excitement, media coverage, scholarly skepticism, eventual discrediting. And yet they keep coming, because the manuscript seems to invite interpretation, to tantalize researchers with the promise that they might be the one to finally unlock its secrets. Meanwhile, other researchers took different approaches entirely. Perhaps the manuscript couldn't be deciphered because it wasn't encrypted at all. Perhaps it was written in an unknown natural language that had since gone extinct. In 2004, carbon dating finally established that the vellum dated to the early 15th century, which at least narrowed the window of possible creation. But knowing when the manuscript was made didn't answer what it said or who made it. Some researchers focused on the illustrations rather than the text. Botanists scrutinized every leaf and petal, looking for identifying characteristics. Astronomers analyzed the celestial diagrams for correspondences with medieval astronomical knowledge. Art historians examined the drawing style, the pigments, the layout conventions. Each approach yielded some insights, but no definitive answers. The botanical illustrations produced particularly intriguing theories. Some researchers noted that a few plants seemed to match species from the Americas, such as sunflowers and what might be tobacco or coca plants. But the Americas weren't discovered by Europeans until 1492, decades after the manuscript's apparent creation date. Could the manuscript have been made later than the carbon dating suggests? Could the creator have had access to American plants through some undocumented earlier contact? Or are the resemblances merely coincidental, the human mind once again finding patterns where none exist? Arthur O. Tucker, a botanist at Delaware State University, along with his colleague Rexford H. Talbot, proposed in 2013 that the manuscript was created in Mexico by Aztec scribes, and that the plants are all New World species, specifically from Mexico. They identified what they claimed were depictions of sensontli, the amaranth plant, texoxocotl, a type of plum, and molly, a term for sauce, possibly depicting ingredients. If true, this would completely revolutionize our understanding of the manuscript, but most scholars remain skeptical, noting that the manuscript shows no characteristics of Nahuatl writing systems, and that the supposed plant identifications require imagination and interpretive flexibility. Then there are those who suggest the manuscript is not a code at all, but rather the product of glossolalia, speaking in tongues. Perhaps it was created by someone in an altered state of consciousness, transcribing a language that exists only in ecstatic vision. This would explain why it has some language-like properties, but doesn't correspond to any actual language. It would be the written record of a private mystical experience, forever incomprehensible to anyone but its creator. Or perhaps, as some have darkly suggested, the manuscript is exactly what it appears to be: genuine knowledge, recorded in a genuine system of notation that we simply don't understand because we've lost the context necessary to interpret it. Imagine future archaeologists discovering a modern chemistry textbook but lacking any knowledge of atomic theory or chemical nomenclature. The periodic table would be meaningless symbols, the molecular diagrams inexplicable arrangements of letters and lines. They might spend centuries trying to decode it, never realizing that it's not encoded at all. It's simply written in a specialized notation that requires extensive background knowledge to understand. If the Voynich manuscript is such a document, then our failure to read it reflects not a puzzle to be solved, but a gap in our knowledge, a break in the chain of transmission between past and present. Somewhere in history, the community that understood this notation died out or was dispersed. The knowledge they possessed was lost. And all that remains is this artifact, this monument to a vanished understanding, speaking in a voice we can no longer hear. The psychological dimension of this possibility is profound. It means there could be vast expanses of human knowledge that have simply disappeared, leaving behind only incomprehensible traces. It means our picture of history is incomplete, not just in its details, but in its fundamental structure. It means there might have been entire systems of thought, entire approaches to understanding the world, that have been lost beyond recovery. This is not a comfortable thought. We prefer to imagine that knowledge accumulates, that we stand on the shoulders of giants, that each generation inherits the wisdom of the past and adds to it. But what if knowledge can be lost completely? What if there are breaks in the chain, gaps in the record, entire traditions that vanish, leaving behind only cryptic remnants? The Voynich manuscript forces us to confront this possibility. In recent years, artificial intelligence has been deployed against the manuscript with increasing sophistication. Machine learning algorithms have been trained to identify patterns in the text, to compare it against databases of known languages, to generate potential decipherments. In 2018, a team from the University of Alberta used AI to analyze the manuscript's language structure, concluding that it most closely resembled Hebrew with vowels removed. They ran the text through translation algorithms and produced some intriguing phrases, but a comprehensive translation remained elusive. The promise of AI is that it can detect patterns invisible to human perception, that it can process vast amounts of data and identify subtle correlations that no human analyst could spot. But so far, AI has succeeded only in confirming what human researchers already suspected, that the manuscript has linguistic structure but doesn't match any known language. The machines, like the humans before them, stand baffled before the manuscript's silence. Perhaps this is the manuscript's greatest teaching, that there are limits to code breaking, boundaries to analysis, mysteries that resist solution despite our best efforts. In our age of information, where almost any question can be answered with a quick search, where vast databases hold the accumulated knowledge of our species, where computers can beat humans at chess and Go and Jeopardy, the Voynich Manuscript remains an affront to our capabilities, a reminder that the past does not always yield to interrogation. The conflict at the heart of Act 2 is not just between researchers and the manuscript, but between our fundamental belief in the solvability of problems and the possibility that some problems might be inherently unsolvable, or at least unsolvable with the tools and knowledge we currently possess. Every failed decipherment is not just a scholarly disappointment, but a challenge to our faith in progress, in the power of reason, in our ability to illuminate every shadow. And yet, we continue trying. We cannot help ourselves. The manuscript calls to us, promising that just one more approach, one more technique, one more brilliant insight might finally unlock its secrets. It is the ultimate intellectual seduction, the perfect unsolved mystery, tantalizing us with the possibility that we might be the one to succeed where so many others have failed. But what if success itself is not the point? What if the manuscript's purpose is not to be read, but to be pursued? What if the real knowledge it contains is not in its text, but in what it teaches us about the process of seeking, the humility of not knowing, the persistence of mystery in a world we believe we've mapped and measured and understood? These questions bring us to the threshold of Act 3, where we must confront not just what the manuscript might mean, but what it means that we cannot read it, what it tells us about ourselves and our relationship to knowledge and to the unknowable past. What the silence teaches us, after more than a century of failed decipherments, after the exhaustion of every conventional approach, after the humbling of the world's greatest minds and most sophisticated technologies, we must ask a different question. Not what does the Voynich manuscript say, but rather, what does the Voynich manuscript mean? The shift from decipherment to meaning, from code breaking to interpretation, represents a profound evolution in how we engage with this mystery. It requires us to consider the possibility that the manuscript's value lies not in what it says, but in what it is, an object that embodies the persistence of the unknowable, an artifact that reminds us that mystery itself has a place in human experience. Let us consider what we have learned, not from reading the manuscript, but from our inability to read it. First, we have learned something about the fragility of knowledge. The Voynich manuscript is physical proof that entire systems of understanding can be lost, whether it's a sophisticated cipher, a constructed philosophical language, a notation system for specialized knowledge, or a natural language that has since died out. The fact remains. Here is a document that clearly meant something to someone, that represents a significant investment of time and resources to create, that was valuable enough to be purchased by an emperor for a small fortune. And we cannot understand a word of it. This should terrify us. It means that knowledge is not inevitably preserved, that transmission from one generation to the next can fail, that entire ways of thinking and seeing the world can vanish, leaving behind only incomprehensible artifacts. How much other knowledge has been lost? How many other manuscripts were destroyed, decayed, or simply thrown away because no one understood their significance? The Voynich manuscript survived only because it seemed mysterious, because people recognized that it was unusual even if they couldn't read it. How much less mysterious knowledge simply disappeared because it seemed mundane, outdated, irrelevant? In the medieval and Renaissance world, knowledge was often transmitted through direct teaching, from master to apprentice, from teacher to student. Many crafts, techniques, and systems of understanding existed only in the memories and practices of living communities. When those communities died out, through plague, persecution, war, or simple demographic shift, their knowledge died with them. The Voynich Manuscript might be a rare survivor from one such vanished community, a message in a bottle sent from a lost world. Second, we have learned about the limits of cryptographic analysis. The manuscript has defeated every code-breaking technique ever invented. This is not because the techniques are faulty, they work perfectly well on every other historical cipher. It's because the manuscript doesn't fit into the categories we've created for understanding encoded text. It's neither a simple substitution cipher, nor a polyalphabetic cipher, nor a codebook system. Its statistical properties place it in a category of its own, neither purely random nor conventionally linguistic. This suggests that there might be forms of information encoding that we haven't conceptualized, systems of notation that don't fit our models of how messages can be hidden. In a strange way, the manuscript has taught us more about the limits of cryptography than any textbook could, by demonstrating through its resistance that our understanding of possible cipher systems might be incomplete. Third, we have learned something profound about human psychology and the nature of pattern seeking. The repeated false breakthroughs in Voynich studies, each researcher convinced they've found the key, only to have their solution collapse under scrutiny, reveal how desperately we want to solve the unsolvable. We are pattern-seeking creatures. It is how we make sense of the world. But the Voynich manuscript is a kind of superstimulus for pattern-seeking, seeming to contain patterns while remaining ultimately patternless, or at least containing patterns we cannot recognize. The manuscript functions like a Rorschach test for scholars. Botanists see plants. Linguists see language structure. Cryptographers see ciphers. Art historians see stylistic elements. Each brings their own expertise and sees confirmation of their specialty. This is not a flaw in the researchers. It's how human cognition works. We see what we're trained to see, what we expect to see, what we want to see. The manuscript reveals this truth about ourselves with uncomfortable clarity. But perhaps the most important revelation is philosophical rather than practical. The Voynich manuscript forces us to confront the existence of genuine mystery in an age that claims to have eliminated mystery. We live in a time when the attitude toward unknown things is that they are merely not yet known, problems awaiting solution, puzzles that will inevitably yield to enough analysis. The manuscript challenges this assumption. What if some things are genuinely unknowable, not because we lack the tools to know them, but because they exist in a category beyond our ability to know? This is not mysticism or anti-intellectualism. It's recognition that human understanding has limits, that our categories and concepts might not be adequate to comprehend everything that exists. Consider the implications. If the manuscript is genuinely unknowable, not just difficult, but impossible to decipher with our current understanding, then it represents a horizon beyond which our knowledge cannot extend. Like the event horizon of a black hole, beyond which no information can escape, the manuscript might mark a boundary of human comprehension. This doesn't mean we should stop trying to understand it. The effort to decode the manuscript has value, even if it never succeeds. It pushes the boundaries of linguistics, cryptography, computer science, and artificial intelligence. It forces us to develop new analytical techniques, to think creatively about how information can be encoded, to consider possibilities we might otherwise ignore. The journey matters even if we never reach the destination. Moreover, the manuscript's resistance to interpretation has paradoxically made it more valuable, not less. A decoded manuscript would be interesting, but a manuscript that cannot be decoded is fascinating. It has become a cultural icon, a symbol of the limits of knowledge, a reminder that the world still contains genuine mysteries. Its very incomprehensibility is its power. There's a spiritual dimension to this as well. Many of the world's wisdom traditions teach that the deepest truths cannot be directly communicated, but must be realized through personal transformation. The Zen koan that seems nonsensical on the surface, but opens to enlightenment through meditation. The alchemical text that describes not chemical processes, but psychological transformation. The mystical experience that cannot be adequately translated into words. Perhaps the Voynich Manuscript belongs to this category of objects, things that communicate not through their literal content, but through the process of engaging with them. In this interpretation, the manuscript is doing exactly what it was designed to do: resist easy comprehension, force deep engagement, transform the seeker through the process of seeking. The code is not meant to be broken, it's meant to be wrestled with. The meaning is not in the text, but in what happens to you when you seriously attempt to read the text. The manuscript is not a container of knowledge, but a catalyst for transformation. This might sound like mystical nonsense, a way of making virtue of necessity, of pretending that failure to decode the manuscript is actually a form of success. But consider the actual effect the manuscript has had on those who've seriously engaged with it. It has inspired new research methodologies. It has brought together scholars from disparate fields: botanists, linguists, cryptographers, art historians, computer scientists, forcing them to collaborate and learn from each other. It has captured the public imagination, making cryptography and medieval studies exciting to people who might otherwise never care about such topics. It has kept alive a sense of wonder, a recognition that the past still holds secrets, that knowledge is not complete. In a very real sense, the Voynich Manuscript has succeeded in its purpose, whatever that purpose might have been. It has survived for more than 6 centuries. It has fascinated generations of scholars. It has resisted destruction, both physical and intellectual. It continues to provoke thought, inspire research, and captivate anyone who encounters it. What more could an author want? Recent developments suggest new possibilities for engagement with the manuscript. High-resolution digital scanning has revealed details invisible to earlier researchers. Tiny marks, subtle colour variations, traces of earlier text that might have been erased and written over. Multispectral imaging can reveal text or images hidden beneath the surface, written in inks that have faded to invisibility. Perhaps the manuscript is even more complex than we realized, containing multiple layers of meaning literally stacked on top of each other. Advanced AI systems, trained on ever larger databases of historical texts and equipped with more sophisticated pattern recognition capabilities, continue to probe the manuscript's secrets. Each new generation of machine learning algorithms brings new approaches. Perhaps artificial intelligence will succeed where human intelligence has failed. Though the fact that this has been predicted for decades and has not yet occurred should give us pause. Or perhaps the solution will come from an unexpected direction entirely. Throughout history, major breakthroughs often come from people approaching problems from unusual angles, bringing perspectives that established experts might overlook. Perhaps someone studying an obscure medieval tradition, or examining historical trade routes, or analysing pigment chemistry, or pursuing what seems like a tangential question, will stumble upon the key that unlocks the manuscript. The possibility of breakthrough coexists with the possibility of permanent mystery. We might decode the manuscript tomorrow, or it might remain unreadable for another 600 years, or forever. All 3 possibilities are live options, and we cannot predict which will occur. But here is what we can say with certainty. The Voynich Manuscript has earned its place in human culture not as a decoded text, but as an enduring mystery. It has become more than itself, transcending its physical form to become a symbol, an archetype, a representation of the unknowable. When we speak of things that resist comprehension, of mysteries that defy solution, of the limits of human knowledge, the Voynich Manuscript stands as the perfect exemplar. It teaches us humility. Despite all our technology, all our analytical sophistication, all our accumulated knowledge, we cannot read this one medieval book. This should make us humble about what we claim to know, cautious about our confidence in our own capabilities, aware that there might be vast spaces of reality that we don't understand and perhaps cannot understand. It teaches us patience. The manuscript has waited for centuries. It can wait centuries more. The solution, if it comes, will come in its own time. We cannot force understanding. We can only prepare ourselves to receive it if and when it arrives. This is a lesson our instant information age desperately needs to learn. It teaches us respect for the past. The people who created this manuscript, whoever they were, whenever they lived, whatever their purpose, were not primitive or naive. They possessed knowledge and capabilities that we do not have. They thought in ways we cannot quite grasp. They created something that has outlasted their civilization, their language, perhaps even their species' memory of them. This demands our respect, not our condescension. And perhaps most importantly, it teaches us to be comfortable with not knowing. We live in an age that treats ignorance as a moral failing, that assumes every question has an answer if we just search hard enough. The Voynich Manuscript says, no. Some things you will not know. Some mysteries will not be solved. And that's okay. Mystery is not a problem to be eliminated, but a fundamental aspect of existence to be embraced. What if we've been asking the wrong question all along? What if the question is not, what does the manuscript say? But what does it mean to live in a world where such manuscripts exist? What does it tell us about ourselves that we cannot let go of this puzzle, that we keep returning to it generation after generation, that we pour so much time and effort into trying to decode it? Perhaps it tells us that we are driven by something deeper than mere curiosity. Perhaps we recognize at some level that the Voynich Manuscript represents something essential that we've lost, a connection to forms of knowledge and ways of thinking that our culture has abandoned or forgotten. Perhaps in trying to read the manuscript, we're really trying to recover a part of ourselves. The manuscript might be a mirror. We look into it and see reflected back our own assumptions, our own blind spots, our own limitations. Each failed attempt to decode it teaches us something not about the manuscript, but about ourselves, about how we think, what we assume, where our understanding breaks down. In this sense, the manuscript is doing exactly what a teacher should do, not providing answers, but guiding students to discover their own limitations and transcend them. What would it mean to truly read the Voynich Manuscript? Not just to decode its symbols, but to understand it in the way its creator understood it, to see what they saw, to know what they knew. It would require not just linguistic or cryptographic skill, but a complete shift in consciousness, an ability to think in categories we don't currently possess, to perceive patterns we're not equipped to perceive. It would require becoming, in some sense, the same kind of person who created it. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the manuscript is saying, if you want to understand me, you must transform yourself. You cannot decode me with your current tools, because I was not created with those tools in mind. You must expand your mind, alter your consciousness, develop new capabilities. Only then will you be able to read me. This is how spiritual texts work. The Bhagavad Gita, the Tao Te Ching, the Christian Gospels, these are not decoded, but realized. You don't just read them with your intellect. You must engage with them at a deeper level, allowing them to reshape your understanding. Perhaps the Voynich Manuscript asks the same of us. And so we arrive at a strange conclusion. The Voynich Manuscript might be the most successful book ever written, not because of what it communicates, but because of what it withholds. It has kept us fascinated for centuries precisely because it will not yield its secrets. it has forced us to question our assumptions, develop new methodologies, collaborate across disciplines, and ultimately confront the limits of our understanding. What more could an author ask? In an age of information overload, where we're drowning in data and starving for meaning, the Voynich Manuscript offers something rare and precious: pure mystery. It is a space where we can be uncertain, where we can not know, where we can embrace the unknown without immediately trying to colonize it with explanation. This is its gift to us. The revelation of Act 3 is not that we've decoded the manuscript, but that we've learned to appreciate it in its undecoded state. We've learned that mystery has value. We've learned that the unknown is not just a gap in our knowledge awaiting filling, but a positive presence, something that enriches rather than impoverishes our experience. We've learned that some treasures are meant to be pursued, but never caught. Some horizons are meant to draw us forward, but never be reached. The Voynich Manuscript will outlast us all. Long after we're gone, it will still be sitting in its climate-controlled vault, still mysterious, still silent, still waiting. Future generations will take their turn trying to decode it. New technologies, new theories, new perspectives will be brought to bear, and perhaps one day someone will succeed, or perhaps not. Either way, the manuscript has already fulfilled its purpose. It has reminded us that Earth's past is deeper and stranger than we imagine. It has preserved a fragment of lost knowledge, even if that knowledge remains inaccessible to us. It has kept alive a sense of wonder, a recognition that the world is more mysterious than our theories can accommodate. It has taught us humility, patience, and respect for the unknown. And in doing so, it has become something more than a manuscript. It has become a legend, a myth, an icon of human curiosity and the eternal mystery of existence. It stands as proof that not everything can be known, not everything can be explained, not everything yields to analysis. And thank God for that, because a world without mystery would be a world diminished, a world that had lost something essential to the human spirit. The Voynich Manuscript is not a problem to be solved. It is a mystery to be honoured, and that might be the most important revelation of all. The eternal question. We have travelled through 600 years of history, from the manuscript's mysterious creation in the early 15th century through its wanderings across Europe, from its rediscovery by Wilfrid Voynich to the countless attempts at decipherment, from the triumphs and failures of the world's greatest minds to this present moment where it still sits, unread and unreadable, in its vault at Yale. What have we learned from this journey? We have learned that human history is deeper and stranger than we typically acknowledge. We have learned that knowledge can be lost, that entire systems of understanding can vanish, leaving behind only cryptic traces. We have learned that our analytical tools, powerful as they are, have limits. We have learned that mystery is not just the absence of knowledge, but a presence in its own right, something that shapes and enriches human experience. The Voynich Manuscript stands as a monument to the unknown. In an age that claims to have mapped every corner of the world, decoded the human genome, photographed the surface of distant planets, and peered back to the beginning of time, here is something we cannot read. This simple medieval book defeats all our sophistication, resists all our technology, remains sealed against all our attempts to penetrate its meaning. And perhaps that's exactly what we need. We need reminders that knowledge is not complete, that understanding is not automatic, that the universe does not owe us comprehensibility. We need objects like the Voynich Manuscript that say, here is a boundary. Here is something beyond your current capacity to know. Here is humility in physical form. But the manuscript also represents hope. Hope that the past still has secrets to yield. Hope that there are still frontiers of discovery even in our own history. Hope that wonder and mystery have not been fully eliminated from human experience. Every time a researcher opens the digital files of the manuscript and begins to study its pages, they are participating in humanity's eternal quest for understanding. They may not succeed in decoding it, but the attempt itself is noble, worthwhile, essential. The Voynich Manuscript asks us a question, the same question it has asked for 6 centuries. Can you read me? Can you understand what I am? Can you bridge the gap between your world and mine, between your way of knowing and the way of knowing that created me? So far, the answer has been no, but the question remains open. And as long as it remains open, as long as the manuscript sits in its vault waiting to be understood, it performs its function perfectly. It challenges us. It humbles us. It reminds us that Earth's past is not fully known, cannot be fully known, might never be fully known. And in that unknowing is a kind of wisdom. Imagine, centuries from now, if the manuscript is finally decoded. Imagine the headlines, the celebration, the satisfaction of finally solving this ancient puzzle. But would something also be lost? Would we mourn the passing of mystery, the closing of this last great historical unknown? Would we miss having this perfect emblem of the undecipherable? Perhaps, but for now we don't have to worry about that. For now, the manuscript keeps its secrets. It remains what it has always been, a book that no one can read, a message from a lost world, a voice speaking in a language we cannot understand. It is beautiful in its mystery, powerful in its resistance, precious in its incomprehensibility. To everyone who has ever looked at the Voynich manuscript and felt that pull of curiosity, that desire to understand, that fascination with the unknown, you are part of a tradition stretching back centuries. You stand alongside emperors and scholars, cryptographers and mystics, all drawn to this same mysterious object, all seeking to penetrate the same veil of secrecy. You may not succeed. You probably won't succeed. But that's not a reason to stop trying. The value is in the attempt, in the engagement, in the relationship between seeker and sought. The Voynich manuscript is not just an object to be decoded, it's a partner in a dance that has lasted 600 years and shows no sign of ending. So let it remain mysterious. Let it continue to resist our attempts at understanding. Let it stand as a permanent reminder that the world contains depths we have not plumbed, knowledge we have not acquired, mysteries we have not solved. Let it be a monument to the unknown, a shrine to the unknowable, a testament to the fact that reality is larger and stranger than our theories about reality. The manuscript asks its question. We attempt our answers. The conversation continues across the centuries, and that conversation itself, that eternal dialogue between human curiosity and the resistance of mystery, might be the real treasure, more valuable than any decoded text could ever be. In the climate-controlled vault at Yale's Binecker Library, the Voynich manuscript waits. Its vellum pages, created from the skin of calves in the early 15th century, preserved through wars and plagues and the casual destruction of time, hold their strange botanical illustrations, their impossible astronomy, their unreadable text. They have waited for 600 years. They can wait 600 more. But somewhere, right now, someone is looking at those pages for the first time. Their breath catches as they see the strange plants, the mysterious diagrams, the flowing script that seems so meaningful, yet remains absolutely incomprehensible. They feel what countless others have felt before them, the pull of mystery, the lure of the unknown, the desire to be the one who finally understands. And so the cycle continues, generation after generation drawn to this same mystery, each bringing new tools and new perspectives, each convinced they might succeed where others have failed. This is not futility. This is humanity at its best, curious, persistent, humble enough to keep trying despite repeated failure, brave enough to confront the unknown without flinching. The Voynich manuscript is not just a book, It is a mirror, reflecting back to us our own relationship with knowledge and mystery. It is a teacher, instructing us in humility and patience. It is a beacon, drawing us toward deeper understanding, even if that understanding remains forever just beyond reach. It is a gift from the past, reminding us that history still has secrets, that the earth we think we know is stranger than we imagine. Let us honour it, not by solving it, but by appreciating it. Let us celebrate the mystery rather than lamenting our failure to dispel it. Let us recognise that in a world increasingly explained and demystified, the Voynich Manuscript performs a sacred function. It keeps alive the possibility of wonder. And when you next see its pages, whether in a photograph, a documentary, or on a research website, take a moment to simply be present with the mystery. Don't immediately try to solve it. Don't rush to explanation or theory. Just observe. Just wonder. Just allow yourself to not know. Because in that moment of not knowing, you are touching something essential. You are standing at the boundary of human understanding, looking out into the vast unknown that surrounds our small island of knowledge. You are participating in the eternal human condition, aware of mystery, drawn to it, humbled by it, enriched by it. The Voynich Manuscript speaks. We cannot understand the words, but we can hear the voice of the unknown, the voice of the past, the voice of mystery itself. It speaks to us across the centuries, and though we cannot decipher its message, we can respond with our attention, our curiosity, our wonder. That response is enough. That response is everything. The book waits. The mystery endures. The question remains open. And somewhere in the future, perhaps tomorrow, perhaps in another 600 years, someone will turn those pages and suddenly, impossibly, understand. Or perhaps they won't. Perhaps the manuscript will keep its secrets forever, remaining forever just beyond our reach, forever calling us forward into deeper engagement with the unknown. Either way, the Voynich Manuscript has already achieved immortality, not through being read, but through being unreadable, not through revealing its secrets, but through keeping them, not through providing answers, but through asking questions that we cannot yet answer, but cannot stop attempting to answer. And in that eternal attempt, in that ceaseless striving toward understanding, in that refusal to accept defeat even in the face of 6 centuries of failure, in that lies the true story of the Voynich Manuscript. Not what it says, but what it makes us do. Not what it reveals, but what it conceals. Not the answer it provides, but the question it poses. The question is simple. Can you understand me? The answer for now is no, but we will keep trying. And that trying, that eternal reaching toward comprehension, that refusal to accept the limits of our understanding, that is what makes us human. That is what drives us forward. That is what the Voynich Manuscript teaches us, through its silence, through its mystery, through its absolute and utter resistance to every attempt we have ever made to read it. The book waits. We seek. The dance continues. And somewhere in that dance, in that space between known and unknown, between seeker and sought, between question and answer, somewhere in that sacred space, we find not the solution to the mystery, but something better. We find meaning in the mystery itself. Thank you for joining me on this journey through time, through knowledge, through mystery. The Voynich Manuscript sits in its vault, as mysterious as ever, waiting for the next seeker, the next theory, the next attempt. Will you be the one who finally reads it? Probably not. But perhaps in trying, you'll discover something more valuable than the answer. You'll discover the joy of the question itself. Until next time, keep seeking, keep wondering, keep embracing the mysteries that make this strange earth of ours worth exploring. The unknown awaits. The past calls. The manuscript speaks in its silent voice, forever asking its unanswerable question. Can you hear it? For the lost blueprint. where ancient mysteries awaken modern wonder.